The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Trelvic of the Zorathian Empire rose to speak. His four arms gestured dramatically, crystalline eyes reflecting the soft blue light that emanated from the central podium. Around him sat representatives from over 200 species, each more anxious than the last. They had gathered here, deep within the neutral station orbiting the dead world of Terminus 9, to discuss the most pressing crisis the galaxy had faced in 3 millennia. The Krell swarm was advancing, consuming everything in its path. Entire star systems had gone dark, billions had perished, but Ambassador Trelvic was not here to discuss the Krell. He was here to discuss humanity. More specifically, what humanity had done to the Krell in the Outer Rim territories. The holographic display activated, showing grainy footage from a Krell hive world. What followed made several delegates physically recoil. Even the Drashani war priests, who had spent centuries perfecting the art of honorable combat, turned their sensor arrays away. What humans called their special forces had turned warfare into something that made demons look merciful. The first clip showed a darkened hive corridor, its chitinous walls still pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. 3 Krell warriors, each standing nearly 3 meters tall with razor-sharp mandibles and armored carapaces capable of deflecting plasma fire, stood guard. Their compound eyes scanned the darkness, antennae twitching as they sensed movement. Then nothing. Not an explosion, not a firefight, just 3 bodies collapsing simultaneously, their throats cut so precisely that their own bioluminescence illuminated the spreading pools of their hemolymph. The footage had been recovered from a Krell surveillance node. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed what had happened. A human operator, later identified only by the designation Operator Kane, had moved through the corridor like a wraith. His approach had been so silent, so impossibly smooth, that even the Krell's sophisticated sensory organs never detected him until it was too late. 3 kills in under 2 seconds. The blade work was surgical, economical, terrifying in its efficiency. But that was just the beginning. The next series of clips came from different locations across the Krell-occupied zones. Each one showed the same pattern. Human Special Forces operators moving with a fluidity that seemed to defy physics. They cleared rooms with a cold precision that made traditional military doctrine look like children playing at war. In one instance, a 6-person team designated as Unit Phantom had infiltrated a Krell command ship. The vessel housed over 3,000 Krell warriors and their elite guard. Security protocols were absolute. The ship itself was a fortress. Unit Phantom went in with minimal equipment. No powered armor, no heavy weapons, just their training, their blades, and something the galaxy was beginning to understand humans possessed in abundance. Absolute ruthlessness when the mission required it. The operation took 43 minutes. When it was over, the command ship's entire officer corps was dead. Its navigation systems were corrupted with a virus that would spread to every ship it encountered, and the 6 human operators had vanished like smoke. The Krell never even knew humans had been aboard until they started finding bodies 3 hours later. Counselor Vexna of the Harmonious Collective, a species renowned for their telepathic abilities and deep commitment to peaceful resolution, finally spoke. Her mental voice resonated through the translation matrix with barely concealed horror. This is beyond warfare. This is systematic elimination. The humans fight without honor, without mercy. They strike from shadows, killing before their enemies even know death approaches. How can we ally ourselves with beings who wage war like this? Admiral Hayes, the human representative, stood slowly. She was a compact woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Unlike the other delegates who wore elaborate ceremonial attire, she wore a simple military uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Defense Coalition. With all due respect, Counselor, she began, her voice calm but carrying an edge that made several delegates stiffen. You asked us to help. The Krell have consumed 17 of your worlds in the past 6 months. Your fleets are shattered. Your armies are broken. You came to Earth begging for intervention because everything else had failed. The Drashani war priest, Commander Zeknal, rose to his full 2.5-meter height. His scaled face showed clear disapproval. There is honor even in defeat, Admiral. Your methods are an abomination. The Krell, for all their savagery, fight openly. They challenge their prey. Your special forces murder from the darkness like cowards. Hayes met his gaze without flinching. Tell that to the 3 billion souls on Drashkar Prime. Oh wait, you cannot. Because the Krell consumed them all while you were busy maintaining your code of honor. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some delegates supported the Drashani position, insisting that humanity's methods violated every principle of civilized warfare. Others, particularly those whose worlds had been devastated by the Krell advance, remained silent. They had seen what honor brought against an enemy that knew no mercy. Ambassador Trelvik raised all 4 arms for silence. When order was restored, he activated another hologram. This footage came from the Krell breeding world of Nest 7, deep in what had been Zorathian space before the invasion. What they saw next would haunt the Council for years. A human team, designation Wolf Pack, had been inserted into Nest 7 with a singular objective: disrupt the Krell breeding cycle. The Krell reproduced at an alarming rate, with each queen producing thousands of eggs per cycle. Nest 7 housed over 50 queens, making it the primary production facility for the entire Krell war effort. The conventional approach would have been orbital bombardment, but the planet's shield generators made that impossible. A ground assault would cost millions of lives and likely fail. The Krell defended their breeding worlds with fanatical intensity. Wolf Pack went in with 12 operators. The footage showed them moving through the underground nest complexes like ghosts. They bypassed thousands of Krell warriors, moving through ventilation systems and maintenance tunnels that should have been too small for human-sized beings. When they encountered patrols, the kills were so fast and silent that neighboring guards never noticed. But the true horror came when they reached the breeding chambers. Each operator carried specialized demolition charges, but they did not use them immediately. Instead, they spent 4 hours methodically placing the devices at precise structural points throughout the complex. The planning was meticulous. Every charge was positioned to create a cascading failure that would collapse the entire underground network. Then they activated the charges and disappeared. The footage from Krell security showed the moment of detonation. The breeding chambers, containing millions of eggs and 50 irreplaceable queens, collapsed in a precisely orchestrated sequence. The destruction was total. Nest 7, which had taken the Krell decades to establish, ceased to exist in under 3 minutes. 11 of the 12 Wolf Pack operators made it to the extraction point. The 12th, a man identified only as Operator Briggs, had been cut off by a Krell response force. His final transmission was short: "Mission accomplished. Tell my wife I love her." Then he detonated his remaining explosives, taking 17 Krell warriors with him. The chamber was silent. Several delegates looked physically ill. The Harmonious Collective's representative was trembling, her telepathic field radiating distress so intense that nearby delegates had to shield their minds. Admiral Hayes spoke into the silence, her voice hard as steel. "You want to know why we fight this way? Let me tell you about Operation Crimson Dawn." She activated her own holographic display, showing a beautiful blue-green world. It was Earth, humanity's homeworld, as it had looked 50 years ago. "The Krell found us before we found you," she continued. "Before we had faster-than-light travel, before we knew we were not alone. They came to Earth thinking we would be easy prey, another primitive world to consume." The hologram shifted, showing Krell dropships descending on major cities. The footage came from human military satellites, showing the initial invasion in brutal detail. "They hit us hard and fast. New York, Beijing, Moscow, London, Tokyo, simultaneously. Our conventional forces fought well, but they were not ready for this. The Krell were technologically superior. They had weapons we could not counter, armor our bullets barely scratched. The hologram showed human soldiers fighting desperately against Krell warriors. The footage was brutal. Humans died by the thousands, but they kept fighting, kept adapting. In 3 weeks we lost over 200 million people, Hayes said quietly. 200 million souls who never got to see the stars. Who died defending their homes against an enemy they did not understand. She paused, her expression growing harder. But we learned. We studied their tactics, their technology. their weaknesses, and we discovered something the Krell never expected. The hologram changed, showing a night operation in what had been downtown Chicago. A small team of humans, the first generation of what would become special forces, moved through Krell-occupied territory. We discovered that for all their technology, for all their strength, the Krell had one critical weakness. They had never faced an enemy that refused to fight fair. Every species they had encountered waged war according to their own biological imperatives. They fought in patterns the Krell could predict. The footage showed the human team setting up an ambush. It was nothing like the honorable combat the Drashani practiced. It was calculated, cruel, efficient. Humans do not have biological imperatives that dictate how we fight, Hayes said. We adapt, we improvise, we do whatever it takes to win. And we learned that the Krell, despite their hive mind, despite their coordination, could not adapt to an enemy that changed tactics faster than they could respond. The ambush played out on the hologram. The Krell patrol, 20 warriors strong, walked into a kill zone the humans had spent 6 hours preparing. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. Explosives, concentrated fire, and ruthless efficiency. In 30 seconds, all 20 Krell were dead. 0 human casualties. That was the first Special Forces operation, Hayes said. We repeated it, refined it, turned it into a doctrine. Within 6 months, we had pushed the Krell off Earth entirely. Not through superior technology, not through greater numbers. Through superior tactics and an absolute refusal to play by their rules. Commander Zeknal stood again, his voice thick with disgust. So you became monsters to fight monsters. You abandoned honor, abandoned decency. What does that make you, Admiral? Hayes turned to face him directly. It makes us alive, Commander. It makes us survivors. And it makes us very, very good at protecting those who cannot protect themselves. She gestured to the assembled delegates. Every species in this chamber has lost worlds to the Krell. You have all tried fighting with honor, with traditional tactics, with the rules of civilized warfare. How has that worked out? The silence was damning. Ambassador Trelvik activated another series of hollows. These showed recent operations conducted by human special forces across Krell-occupied space. Each one demonstrated the same pattern. Small teams achieving impossible objectives through methods that made conventional military commanders shudder. In the Vexar system, a 4-person team designated Shadow Unit had infiltrated a Krell processing facility where captured aliens were being converted into biomass to fuel the swarm. The facility was fortress, protected by thousands of warriors and multiple layers of security. Shadow Unit went in during a shift change, moving through the chaos with practiced ease. They eliminated guards silently, disabled security systems, and freed over 10,000 prisoners. Then they planted demolition charges throughout the facility's power core. The explosion could be seen from orbit. All 4 operators made it out. The freed prisoners, following escape routes the humans had marked, scattered into the wilderness before Krell reinforcements arrived. Over 8,000 of them survived to tell the tale of humans who fought like demons to save complete strangers. Another operation, this one in the Keldar Nebula, showed a solo operator known only as Phantom working to eliminate a Krell spy network that had infiltrated a major trade hub. Traditional counterintelligence would have taken months and risked tipping off the Krell. Phantom took 72 hours. The footage showed Phantom moving through the crowded station like a wraith, identifying Krell agents through methods that remained classified. Each elimination was surgical, silent, invisible. By the time the Krell realized their entire network had been compromised, Phantom was 3 star systems away. 14 Krell agents eliminated. 0 civilian casualties. 0 collateral damage. But it was the footage from the Draken campaign that truly shook the Council. Draken 4 had been a thriving Zorathian colony before the Krell invasion. Home to over 50 million souls, it had been one of the Empire's crown jewels. When the Krell came, the Zorathian defense fleet fought with everything they had. They lasted 6 hours. The Krell occupation had been brutal. Millions were processed into biomass. The survivors lived in constant terror, working to support the Krell war machine. For 3 years, Draken 4 suffered under Krell rule while the galaxy watched helplessly. Then humanity intervened. The operation was designated Liberation Protocol Gamma. High Command sent in not one team but 200 of humanity's best Special Forces operators, coordinating across an entire planet. The footage showed their insertion, teams dropping from orbit in stealth pods that scattered across Draken 4's surface. Each team had specific objectives. Some targeted Krell command centers, others focused on supply lines. Several teams worked to organize and arm the resistance. The campaign lasted 38 days. The human operators did not fight like soldiers. They fought like a plague. Everywhere the Krell turned, they found death waiting in the shadows. Supply convoys vanished. Command posts went silent. Warriors on patrol simply disappeared, their bodies found days later with their throats cut. The Krell, masters of biological warfare and swarm tactics, found themselves hunted by an enemy they could not see, could not predict, could not stop. One particularly disturbing piece of footage showed a Krell warrior commander, a massive creature that stood over 4 meters tall and had personally killed hundreds of Zorathians, being taken down by a single human operator. The operator, later identified as Sergeant Danny Walsh, had stalked the commander for 6 hours, waiting for the perfect moment. When it came, Walsh moved with speed that seemed impossible for a being his size. The Krell commander never had a chance. Its bodyguards found it 15 minutes later, exsanguinated and marked with a symbol the humans had started leaving on high-value targets. A simple death's head painted in the commander's own hemolymph. The message was clear: we see you, we can reach you, you are not safe. On day 38, the Krell broke. Their forces on Draken 4, demoralized and decimated, attempted to evacuate. Human teams were waiting at every extraction point. The slaughter was absolute. Of the 200 operators sent to Draken 4, 187 made it home. The losses were painful, but the results spoke for themselves. An entire planet liberated. 43 million Zorathians freed from Krell occupation. The Krell never attempted to reoccupy Draken 4. Ambassador Trelvik let the footage end, the final image showing Zorathian civilians weeping with joy as they embraced human operators who had risked everything to save them. You speak of brutality, he said quietly, of methods that even demons would find excessive. But I was there on Draken 4 when the humans arrived. I saw my people, broken and starving, given hope for the first time in 3 years. He turned to face Commander Zeknal directly. You speak of honor, Commander, of fighting with dignity and respect for your enemy. Where was that honor when the Krell processed my family into biomass, when they turned my homeworld into a feeding ground? The Drashani war priest had no answer. Admiral Hayes stood once more, her expression grave. You invited humanity to this council to judge our methods, to determine if we are monsters for fighting the way we do. I understand your concerns, I truly do. What we do in the shadows is ugly, brutal. Sometimes it keeps me awake at night, thinking about the things my people have done in the name of victory. She paused, meeting the gaze of every delegate in turn. But I also think about the billions of souls who are alive because of those brutal methods, the children who have parents, the families that remained intact, the civilizations that still exist because humanity was willing to do what others would not. The Harmonious Collective's representative spoke, her mental voice still shaky but gaining strength. You ask us to accept methods that violate everything we believe about civilized warfare. How can we reconcile this with our principles? Hayes smiled sadly. I'm not asking you to accept our methods, counselor. I'm not asking you to like them. I'm asking you to understand why they exist. We did not choose to fight this way because we are cruel. We chose it because it works. Because when the alternative is extinction, you do what you must to survive. She activated one final hologram. This one showed Earth as it was now. A thriving world, covered in cities that gleamed in the sunlight. Orbital stations crowded its space. Ships came and went in a constant stream. This is what we are fighting for, she said simply. Not glory, not conquest, just the right to exist, to live, to see tomorrow. If that makes us monsters in your eyes, so be it, but we will continue to fight. We will continue to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and we will do it with every tool at our disposal, no matter how brutal it seems. The chamber fell silent once more. The delegates looked at each other, uncertainty clear on their varied faces. They had come here expecting to condemn humanity, to censure these brutal newcomers who waged war without honor. Instead, they found themselves facing an uncomfortable truth. Humanity fought the way it did because it worked. Because in the cold calculus of survival, honor was a luxury they could not afford. It was Counselor Vexna who finally spoke, her mental voice carrying a mixture of resignation and reluctant respect. "We cannot condone your methods, Admiral Hayes. They violate too many of our core principles, but neither can we deny their effectiveness." She paused, clearly struggling with what she was about to say. "The harmonious collective withdraws its motion to censure humanity. We will continue to oppose these tactics philosophically, but we acknowledge that in this war such opposition is a luxury we cannot afford." One by one, other delegates voiced similar sentiments. They did not approve. They did not like it. But they recognized reality. The Krell were winning. Humanity offered a path to victory, even if that path was soaked in blood. Commander Zeknal was the last to speak. His voice was heavy with disappointment, but also with understanding. The Drashani honor the warrior's code above all else. What humanity does violates that code in every possible way. He looked at Admiral Hayes, his expression complex. "But honor means nothing to the dead. My people learned that when Drashkar Prime fell. We maintained our code, fought with dignity, and died for it. Perhaps there is wisdom in your brutality, Admiral. Perhaps survival requires setting aside such luxuries." Hayes nodded respectfully. "I take no pleasure in what my people do, Commander. Every operation costs us. Every mission takes something from the operators who carry them out. They shoulder that burden so others do not have to." The council session ended with a formal resolution. Humanity would continue its operations against the Krell, but with increased coordination with galactic forces. Resources would be shared. Intelligence would flow both ways. And most importantly, the galaxy would stop judging humanity for doing what was necessary. As the delegates filed out, Ambassador Trelvik approached Admiral Hayes. The Zorathian's 4 arms moved in a gesture of respect. "I owe you an apology, Admiral. When I called this session, I intended to expose humanity's brutality. To show the galaxy what monsters you had become." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "And now I understand that you became what was necessary to survive. My people are alive because of your brutality. 43 million souls who would be dead if you had fought with honor." The Admiral smiled grimly. "We are not monsters, Ambassador. We are just very, very good at what we do. And what we do is make sure our enemies regret ever threatening the innocent." 3 months after the council session, the tide of the war began to turn. Human Special Forces operations intensified across Krell-occupied space. The tactics that had horrified the Galactic Council proved devastatingly effective on a larger scale. Operation Night Harvest saw 50 teams simultaneously strike at Krell logistics networks across 24 star systems. In a coordinated campaign that lasted 10 days, they crippled the Krell's ability to resupply their forward positions. Millions of tons of biomass destined for the swarm never reached its destination. The Krell, accustomed to predictable enemy behavior, found themselves unable to adapt. Every time they reinforced one sector, humans struck somewhere else. Every time they tightened security, human operators found new vulnerabilities to exploit. But the humans did not fight alone. Reluctantly, other species began to adopt elements of human tactics. Not the brutal efficiency of Special Forces operations, but the principles behind them: flexibility, adaptability, willingness to strike where the enemy least expected. The Drashani, unable to fully abandon their code of honor, created a new branch of their military. The Shadow Warriors, as they were called, operated outside traditional command structures. They trained with human operators, learning stealth and precision strikes. Commander Zeknal personally led the 1st Shadow Warrior unit. In their maiden operation, they infiltrated a Krell mining facility and sabotaged its power core, destroying resources the Krell desperately needed. When questioned about abandoning Drashani honor, Zeknal had a simple response: There is honor in protecting the helpless. If that requires fighting from the shadows, so be it. Even the harmonious collective, who had been most opposed to human methods, found ways to contribute. Their telepathic abilities proved invaluable for coordinating operations and providing early warning of Krell movements. They could not bring themselves to kill directly, but they could ensure human operators had every advantage. The war continued for another 2 years, but its character had fundamentally changed. The Krell, so dominant when facing conventional forces, found themselves being systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to fight fair. The turning point came at the Battle of Krell Prime, their homeworld. Galactic forces had been trying to assault it for months, suffering catastrophic losses. The world was protected by defenses that made conventional attack impossible. So humanity did what humanity did best. They went around the defenses. Operation Final Harvest involved the largest special forces deployment in human history. 500 operators, supported by conventional forces and allied species, infiltrated Krell Prime through a combination of stealth insertion and sheer audacity. Their target was not the Krell military command, not the planetary defenses. It was something far more fundamental to the Krell collective. The Krell Queen Mother, the ancient creature that coordinated the entire swarm across the galaxy. The operation took 3 weeks of constant combat. Human operators fought their way through hive complexes that stretched for kilometers underground. They faced elite Krell warriors bred specifically to protect the Queen Mother. Casualties were heavy, but they kept pushing forward. Lieutenant Kevin Morgan led the final assault team. His squad of 12 operators faced over 200 elite guards in the Queen Mother's chamber. The footage from their helmet cameras showed combat so intense, so close quarters and brutal, that it made previous operations look tame by comparison. Morgan and 3 others survived to reach the Queen Mother herself. The ancient creature, massive beyond comprehension, attempted to communicate, tried to bargain, offered technology, territory, anything to survive. Morgan's response was short: for Earth, for every world you consumed, for every innocent life you destroyed. He detonated the fusion charge they had carried through 3 weeks of hell. The explosion destroyed the Queen Mother and collapsed the hive complex. Morgan and his team were killed instantly, but their sacrifice broke the Krell forever. Without the Queen Mother's coordination, the swarm fragmented. Individual hive fleets turned on each other. The unified threat that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia ceased to exist. The remaining Krell forces were hunted down over the following months. Some surrendered. Most fought to the death, unable to adapt to existence without the Queen Mother's guidance. The war was over. A memorial was constructed on Terminus 9, the same station where the Council had debated humanity's methods. It bore the names of every human operator who had died in the war against the Krell. Over 3,000 names, each representing a person who had willingly descended into darkness so others could live in the light. At the memorial's dedication, Admiral Hayes gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. "These men and women were not monsters," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd of humans and aliens alike. "They were ordinary people who did extraordinary things. They killed, yes. They fought without mercy when mercy was not an option. They became what was necessary." She paused, looking at the wall of names. "But they also saved billions. They liberated worlds. They gave hope to those who had none. And they did it knowing that history might condemn them as butchers, as killers, as monsters." Her voice grew stronger. "Let history judge them however it wishes. I know what they were. They were heroes, every single one of them." Commander Zeknal, standing nearby, made a gesture of respect. "I once called them cowards for fighting from the shadows. I was wrong. It takes greater courage to do what must be done when you know it will cost you everything, including the respect of those you protect." Ambassador Trelvik placed all 4 hands on the memorial wall, touching the name of the operator who had personally freed him from Krell captivity on Draken 4. Sergeant Danny Walsh. "The galaxy called him a demon. I called him a friend." Counselor Vexna sent her thoughts to all present, her telepathic voice filled with sorrow and gratitude. "I was wrong to oppose them. Their methods frighten me, they still do. But I understand now that sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to embrace the darkness yourself. Years passed, the galaxy rebuilt. Worlds that had been consumed were reclaimed and restored. New civilizations rose from the ashes of the old. The Krell threat was gone, relegated to history, but humanity's special forces did not disband. They evolved, taking on new missions. Humanitarian relief in disaster zones, counter-terrorism operations, rescue missions in hostile territory. Anywhere the galaxy needed someone willing to go into the darkness, human operators were there. The galaxy never fully embraced human methods. Many species still found them distasteful, even abhorrent, but they no longer questioned their necessity. They had seen what happened when you fought fair against enemies who knew no fairness. And so the reputation grew. When pirates threatened trade routes, whispers would spread. The humans are coming. When slavers raided vulnerable worlds, the message would go out. Call the special forces. When tyranny and oppression took hold, hope remained. Because somewhere in the shadows, humans were watching. A new recruit to human special forces once asked her instructor about the reputation, about being called demons, monsters, things that frightened even the enemy. The instructor, a grizzled veteran with more combat deployments than most people had years of life, smiled grimly. "Let them call us what they want," he said. "Demons, monsters, the things that nightmares fear. As long as the innocent sleep safely at night, I do not care what anyone calls us." He gestured to the memorial visible through the training facility's windows. "Those names up there, they earned every title, and they would do it all again without hesitation, because that is what we do. We go into the dark so others can live in the light. We become monsters so the innocent do not have to." The recruit nodded, understanding for the first time what she had signed up for. Not glory, not honor in the traditional sense, but something deeper, a commitment to protect no matter the cost. That night, as she stood watch during a training exercise, she thought about the words, about what it meant to be part of something bigger than herself. In the distance, she could see the lights of a civilian station. Thousands of beings living their lives, unaware of the darkness that constantly threatened to consume them. Unaware of the people who stood between them and that darkness. She smiled, understanding now why the veterans carried themselves with such quiet pride. Not because they were heroes, though they were. Not because they were honored, though they deserved to be. But because they knew, deep in their souls, that what they did mattered. That every mission, every operation, every brutal act committed in service of the greater good made the galaxy a safer place. And if that made them monsters in the eyes of some, so be it. The galaxy needed monsters sometimes, but it needed the right kind of monsters, the kind who fought for the innocent, who sacrificed everything for those who could not fight for themselves, the kind who would go into hell itself if it meant one more child got to see tomorrow. That was what human special forces were. That was what they had always been. Such brutality even demons could not stand, but such nobility that the innocent would never have to. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, operators moved silently through hostile territory, executing missions that would never be declassified, earning medals they would never wear in public, dying deaths that would never make the news. They did it without complaint, without hesitation, without regret, because that was the job, and someone had to do it. Humanity had learned long ago that survival required sacrifice. That peace demanded warriors. That civilization needed guardians willing to get their hands bloody. They had accepted that burden when the Krell came to Earth. They carried it now across the galaxy, and they would carry it forever as long as there were threats to face and innocence to protect. The galaxy called them special forces. Humanity called them necessary. The enemy called them demons. They called themselves servants. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.